Hello and welcome to a medieval adventure. Welcome to Pontefract Castle, one of the most fearsome forts in medieval history. Pontefract Castle in West Yorkshire, or Pontefract Castle as it was known in its medieval days, used to be the most important and most terrifying castle, with a gruesome and feared reputation. Across the next two videos we'll be looking at the stories around the remains of the castle, heading underground to look at an ancient well, and in the second part we'll be looking at the rumours of secret tunnels under the castle, and heading down into its eerie dungeons deep below the surface. Mentioned in the works of Shakespeare, and visited by Henry VIII, Richard III, Elizabeth I and Charles I, this impenetrable fortress had a reputation for many gruesome deaths, murders and beheadings. It was famous for Richard II's death, an affair by one of Henry VIII's wives, and hundreds of soldiers that were killed or imprisoned here in its dark dungeons during the War of the Roses. It was eventually destroyed under orders from Oliver Cromwell, who hated the castle and all it stood for. He convinced the locals of Pontefract to back him and have it destroyed. It proved too tough even for a planned demolition. There are still a remarkable amount of remains still standing today. In the Victorian period, it was used to grow and store licorice, one of the treats that Pontefract is famous for. It was also turned into a pleasure gardens with ornate stone pathways, gardens and fountains. It is now owned by Wakefield Council, and with the help of English heritage and lottery grants, it is gaining attention and slowly being turned into the visitor attraction that it deserves to be, rather than the much smaller but more publicised castles in York. One can only imagine how impressive this would have been today if it weren't for the demolition. With its impressive size and legendary stories, this castle is well worth a story to be told. So let's get on with it. And what you can see behind me are the remains of the keep, which would have been the central part of the castle, the strongest part of the castle, where everybody would have lived. And then you have the outer walls of the castle with the various towers around the site, and also then the moat beyond that. And as you can see, definitely the strongest part of the castle, because it's the only bit that hasn't been demolished. It's good anyway. A lot of it is still intact. Now as we stand on the outer edges of the castle here, you would have obviously had a wall going all the way around the outside here, with towers all the way around the castle. And I'll show you some of those remains very shortly. But down here would have been the moat of the castle. But this part is very strange because, as you can see, it's now built on by houses. So all the back gardens down here are actually in the moat of the castle, which is very interesting. There's believed to have been 12 towers in this castle, including the keep, the central one here. So this large piece here is known as the West Tower in the keep. And this doorway behind me, we're going to be heading inside there to check out an old medieval well, which is deep below the ground.
Okay, so we've come up the modern stairs down there, and you can see the roof with the barrel vaulting top. And obviously this is where it meets the historic staircase, and you can see the change in the construction. You can see the route. You would have come down those and it would have gone around a corner and then headed off down there.
Okay, so we're in the keep currently of the castle, and we've just headed down below the ground, but now we're into one of the original parts of the castle underneath. But what we're looking at here is a well. Now, Ian tells me that it was never used as a well because there wasn't any water down here. So I'll just pop you over here and show you the well. It's very dry. Obviously, like I said, it didn't have any water. But they started digging it. Basically, they would have needed, if the castle was invaded, the keep in the centre would have been the strongest part of the castle, so it would have lasted. But they needed to make sure that the people that were in here had access to fresh water and food. So this was them starting to dig a well to hopefully enable that. So just next to the well, there's this little, well, I'd say a little room here. It's not really a corridor, but it's just slightly down from the well. Now, they're not sure what this is. It could have been maybe a store of some kind, or even some other attempt at making another well, another shaft on this side. But as you can see, nothing ever came of it. So you can see the cross there in the centre of the stone. So that's just a mason's mark. Now, I believe they used to get paid per stone, didn't they? So obviously they would mark it to make sure that everyone knew it was theirs, so they would get paid for doing it. And there's a couple of marks on these ones as well.
Yep.
So it says R.A. Poppleton on the wall there. A bit of Victorian graffiti from 1883. Again, you can see a cross just there in the centre, and another one. Let's get you a bit closer. Another one on that step there. So there's this further staircase which leads up into the keep. It's inaccessible currently, but it just leads down towards the well. With this being an original one. Mm-hmm. So this is an original staircase here. So let's make our way up these steps here and see what the view's like from up there. Now, it's worth mentioning that if you want to visit Pontefract Castle, you can do. It's completely free, including the car park. So please come and check it out. They also do tours of the dungeon at certain times of the year for a small fee. I think it's a couple of quid. So get yourself down if you want to see the castle or the dungeons. So here we are on top of the keep, which is the central part of the castle. And again, the strongest part of the castle. Just check out those views. You can see why they built a castle up here. You can see for many, many miles all around, 360 degrees, including Ferry Bridge Power Station. I doubt that would have been there. So just up here you can get the scale of the castle and its size. So I'm stood on top of the keep, and you had all this courtyard here. Now all of this is walled off around the back. You would have had towers all the way along around the castle, and then obviously the moat down the hill. But you can just get the scale of the size right here and how big this place actually was. So in case you're not aware, there is a connection to this castle with Richard II, who at the time would have been king when he was brought here. And there are rumours going round, and it's mainly Shakespeare's fault, because in the Shakespeare books, he mentions that Richard II was left in the dungeons to rot and die, basically, at Pontefract Castle, or Pontefract Castle as he called it. But that isn't exactly true. He was kept here in what would have been the second best quarters in the castle. He wouldn't have been kept in the royal quarters on the other side of the site, because that wouldn't have pleased the current king at the time. Instead, he was kept here, which would have been pretty decent by medieval standards anyway. And also it was did you say it was a bakery down here? Yeah. So they were baking bread here, and so it would have been very warm. But Richard II actually died of starvation. Now, whether he starved himself to death or they starved him in order for him to die, we don't know. But it would have been treason had they have killed the king, so they couldn't do anything of the sort. So just a bit of a closer look in these posh living quarters here. And just behind me you can see what appears to be two kilns, or I would say ovens, as we know that this was a bakery here, so they would have used these as giant ovens to bake the bread. There's one on the other side as well. Now just behind me is one of the more recently restored sections of the castle. You can tell by the stonework. You can see the stone blocks where they've repaired the walls there. And then down here they've got a section of concrete to strengthen this outer wall here. But again, one of the entrances into the castle there from the outside. So let's check out this little doorway underneath the outer wall of the castle. So this takes us into the small courtyard that I was talking about that's been restored. So this probably would have continued straight ahead into the courtyard. Now, throughout its history, they tried so many times to demolish this castle and get rid of it, but they failed miserably. This castle was such a strong fort and a very, very well built castle that Oliver Cromwell and all his people tried to demolish it. And what you see today is what is left of it, and it's quite a lot is still remaining. And just to give you some context, that's the outer edge of the wall there, and the inner edge is over here. That's probably 10 feet across. That's how thick the walls were around the castle. So this is the outside of the wall here. And then the inner part of the castle just there. We're just on the outer perimeter wall here, looking across Pontefract, and you can see what appears to be another mound or hill over there. Looks like a mound that a castle should be sat on the top of, but it's not. That is mining related. Now, Pontefract Castle is also where one of Henry VIII's wives, Catherine Howard, had an affair with her lover here. So much of this castle still remains buried underneath here. As you can see, this building, or the remains of it, are sunken quite deep down into the ground here. And this level piece of grass here, I'm sure one day will be completely excavated to uncover more of what laid beneath the ground here. Just like the keep when we were up there, that's all filled with soil now, right to the top. That would have been hollow. Another remain of another tower that was situated right here. You can see an old doorway down there and a staircase rising up to the wall here. But just look at those houses down there. Not many places your back garden or your back windows overlook a medieval castle. So a big thank you to Wakefield Council and Ian from the Pontefract Castle here. If you fancy a visit to Pontefract Castle, it's very easy to find, right slap bang in the centre of Pontefract. Come and drop them a visit, show your support, and have a look round this massive, massive site. It's beautiful. Come and see the views from the top.
Join us in part 2, where we head below the castle bedrock for a trip to the dungeons, and also take a look at the myths and legends surrounding the secret tunnels under the castle, linking to various places around the area.
Well, thank you very much for joining us here at Pontefract Castle. You can check out more of my videos here, and I'll see you in the next one.